11th degree. Sublime Knight elected. This grade was originally instituted by Solomon as a reward for the zeal and constancy of the true and faithful craftsmen who were engaged in the construction of the temple. In this degree it is the duty of the Sublime Knights elected to prepare a proper code of statutes for the elected Knights of 9 and 15. The lecture explains the duties of the Sublime Knights, and the Mystic O, which was composed of F, M, W, O, decorations. This lodge is held in a place representing an antechamber in King Solomon's palace. It is hung with black tapestry strewed with flaming hearts, and is illuminated by 24 lights. Titles: the lodge is called a chapter. At an initiation only 12 brethren are permitted to be present. The master represents Solomon and is styled thrice puissant. Instead of wardens, there is a grand inspector and a master of ceremonies. Clothing: the brethren are clothed as in the preceding grade. Apron, white, lined and bordered with black. In the center of the apron is a pocket on which is painted or embroidered a poniard surrounded by 9 flames. Order: a broad black ribbon from the left shoulder to the right hip, on which are embroidered 3 inflamed hearts, or this motto, Vincere aut Mauri. At the bottom of the ribbon hangs a gold poniard with a silver blade. Jewel: the same as the preceding degree, with the addition of 3 hearts inflamed, on the balance, 1 in the center and 1 at each end. Opening ceremonies. Thrice puissant, Brother Inspector, what is your duty to this chapter? Inspector: to see that we are all secure. Thrice puissant: are you a Sublime Knight elected? Inspector: thrice puissant, my name will convince you. Thrice puissant: what time is the chapter open? Inspector: 12 o'clock at midnight, the hour of the reconciliation of reason and feeling. Thrice puissant: Knox 7. I declare this chapter of Sublime Knights elected open. 1 rap. All are seated. Initiation. Master of Ceremonies, Knox 7 at the door. Inspector: thrice puissant, there is an alarm at the door. Thrice puissant, Brother Expert, see who knocks at the door of our chapter. Expert goes to the door, knocks 7 and opens it. Who knocks at the door of our chapter? Master of Ceremonies, Brother Joe Abbott, a master-elect of 15, who has passed through all the preceding degrees, and beseeches you to confer on him the degree of Sublime Knight elected. Expert: thrice puissant, it is Brother Joe Abbott, a master-elect of 15, who has passed through all the preceding degrees, and beseeches you to confer on him the degree of Sublime Knight elected. Thrice puissant, has his conduct been without reproach, and are the illustrious knights satisfied with it? Expert: to Master of Ceremonies. Has his conduct been without reproach, and are the illustrious knights satisfied with his conduct? Master of Ceremonies, all here present are satisfied with his conduct. Expert: thrice puissant, all here present are satisfied with his conduct. Thrice puissant, then let him be introduced in a proper manner. Expert: let Brother Joe Abbott be introduced in a proper manner. Master of Ceremonies puts a naked sword in his right hand with the blade across his body, a compass in his left hand with the points to his heart. Thus arranged he conducts him into the chapter and seats him in the west in front of the inspector. Thrice puissant, Brother Master of Ceremonies, why have you led Joe Abbott into our presence? Master of Ceremonies, to beseech the thrice puissant to confer the sublime degree upon him, for by his valor, veracity and vigilance he has warned the hearts of his brethren, and they have chosen him to represent them in this assembly of sublime elected knights, and to join you in studying the laws the grand architect has written upon the hearts of all men, so that legislation may be a unit and a blessing instead of being a curse. Thrice puissant, the right of the Masonic people to representation, is consecrated from time immemorial, and on this occasion it is with joy I learn the choice of your fellows has fallen on Joe Abbott. It is the just reward of your merit, Brother Joe Abbott. Arid, we greet you in this assembly where you now may see the scales of justice adorned by the symbols of the affections, to express that justice should be tempered with mercy, that the law must be conceived in a spirit of love, and that the happiness of the people does not exclusively depend upon rigid expressions of wrong, but also upon a generous display of sentiment. Thrice puissant, Brother Expert, you will now teach Brother Joe Abbott to travel. Expert divests him of his sword and compasses which be hands to the Master of Ceremonies, makes the candidate cross his hands on his breast, and conducts him first to the west. causes him to kneel and say civi. Thrice puissant, Kai, candidate rises. Expert conducts him to the south where he kneels, from thence to the north where he kneels, and from thence to the east, in front of the thrice puissant, where he kneels also. Thrice puissant, Brother Joabot, you have been caused to kneel at the 4 points of the compass in allusion to the 4 gates of the temple, and the respect we should have to enter a place consecrated. You will now contract the solemn obligation of the Sublime Knight elected. Obligation Sublime Knight elected. I state your name, promise and swear on the same obligations I have already taken and contracted to keep secret the degree of the Sublime Knights elected, with which I am going to be entrusted, as well in regard to Masons under this degree as to the profane. I furthermore promise to adore my God, to be faithful to my country, to be charitable to my neighbors and brothers, submitting myself in case of any infraction of this my obligation, to have my body severed in two, my memory lost and looked upon as infamous and forsworn. So God and his holy evangelists be my help. Amen. Thrice puissant, puts his sword 3 times on the candidate's head. Brother Joabot, I greet you as a Sublime Knight elected, and pledge you on in a cup of wine as generous as that poured out by Ganem to we Olympian gods, for it denotes our sincere feelings towards you as a member of this council, towards those you represent, as well as towards all mankind. Wine is then poured out in 3 glasses, then the thrice puissant, expert and candidate touch glasses. Thrice puissant, Brother Joabot, we pledge you in the wine cup and welcome you as a member of this chapter of Sublime Knights elected. All 3 drink. Thrice puissant, arise Brother Joabot and receive the recompense due you. He then decorates him with the sash and apron and gives him the sign, grip and word. Sign, cross the arms on the breast, the fingers clenched, and thumbs elevated. Tokens, first, present to each other the thumb of the right hand, the fingers clenched. One seizes the thumb of the other and reverses thrice his wrist. One says brith, the other one says nda, then first then says shalmoth. Second, take one the right hand of the other, and with the thumb strike thrice on the first joint of the middle finger. Battery, 12 equi time strokes. Hours of labor, from low 12 until daylight. Password, Stokin. Running of water. Sacred word, Adonai. Moral, that the true and faithful brother will sooner or later receive his just reward. Thrice puissant, Brother Expert, you will now conduct Brother Joabot to his seat in the chapter while our Grand Master of Eloquence delivers the discourse. Discourse by Grand Master of Eloquence. My dear brother, let your heart be entirely devoted to enjoy the ecstasy of innocent joy, with springs of full satisfaction to feel all the emotion that it will inspire you with. Bless 1,000 times this happy day which will open to you the perfection you desire. In short, congratulate yourself with having reached the degree of Sublime Knight elected which we have just given you. Do not think that it is one of the imaginary and proud titles which have neither origin or ground for it. Open the sacred books, search in the holy history and you will find the epoch of your state. There you will see the excellence and privileges of it. I should without doubt pass the limits of an ordinary discourse if I was to take up time to let yon know the whole extent of it. I will leave the natural curiosity to those who ought to be willing to know perfectly the state which they have embraced, with care to make the necessary inquiry for the knowledge you ought to possess. I will be satisfied to expose the duties and obligations of it. The promise you have just now made and contracted in the quality of Sublime Elected Knight, is the greatest and most solemn of them all. I will not speak to you of the prudence with which you have so often laid the law of, on yourself. You know that virtue too well, and with the practice of it must be so familiar to you that it will be needless to exhort you to it. And for that reason we fear no violation from your side. I shall only renew to you the importance of the promises you just now have made and which are the chief matters of your obligation. There is no one in this degree who has not submitted like you, and in short, if all men have indispensably fulfilled those duties you just now imposed on yourself, with what zeal, what eagerness and what ardor, should not a Sublime Elected Knight acquit himself? We first promise to love and adore God. This is the natural law which is engraved in us. I say more, which came into the world before us, and who is he that could transgress this duty and not render the lawful tribute to him which is owing from us to the vilest creature he has formed, sustaining us only by the means of his power which he may destroy or annihilate without our being able to accuse him of rigor and injustice. This is, My illustrious knight, the first of your duty that reason teaches, truth shows and justice establishes tons. You have also promised to be faithful to your country. Is there any among us who does not feel it perfectly and is not fully convinced of the necessity of this part of our obligation of loyalty, as we conform ourselves to the customs which have been established for all those who, as well as you, attain to a degree as eminent as this in which you are now clothed, and to whom is trusted the glory of justice which you have in your hand? We must now, my brother, explain to you the names and letters which were shown you when you were initiated in our sublime degree in mysteries. It's not one of the common names which has neither sense, reason nor signification. It is a name which is as those in use in Eastern nations, showing the virtue of those who are found worthy of having it. Yours in the quality of Sublime Knight elected is Muth, a Hebrew word signifying a true man on all occasions. Can there be any better or more glorious name? And would it not be a shame and disgrace to any of us who should expose himself to do anything and be capable of degenerating from it? Now let us come to the allegorical explanation of the figures you have seen in the draught. They will serve to instruct you in the sense and science of your state, and teach you to unfold little by little the moral sense. They contain the precepts you ought to follow, the principles on which you ought to act, and the duties you have to fulfill. The elected, as you know, were those Solomon chose to watch the work which was done in the temple after the death of Hiram-Abith. The temple was at last finished and completed to its last perfection. God appeared satisfied with this building which was consecrated to him. It is that cloud in which they have been willing to trace the image of God in this draught by the triangle which you see in the cloud. Therefore it is very easy to make from these two figures a just and true application. Our hearts are the living temple, where are erected altars which ought to receive the sacrifices which we make to the Lord. It should always be a temple worthy of him. We can never know too much how to employ our time for its construction, neither can we apply ourselves too much to carry offerings which may be agreeable to him. To render ourselves worthy of his favors, we ought to compare to that miraculous cloud which spread itself over the ark, by which God showed the favorable alliance he had made with his people, which is the chief object of the draught now before you. In that box which hangs at the top of the draught, were deposited the hearts of the victims who were offered to the Lord and which were accepted sacrifices. If the gift you make of your heart is pure, it will become a true figure of it, and he will not reject the offering of it if all that lies in it is worthy to be offered to him. You also see the urn. It was there Solomon ordered the heart of Hiram-Abith to be deposited, as an authentic mark of esteem and tenderness he had for him, which is without doubt a very urgent lesson, which invites us to re-inflame our endeavors in conducting our actions of life, that we may be able to leave behind a memory worthy to be consecrated with respect, esteem and veneration. The pair of scales you perceive to be an attribute of justice. It is here exposed to your sight to make you remember that it is with that you ought to weigh your proceeding and projects if you are inclined to deserve the glorious name of Muth. The sword with which you are armed, and given you by the thrice puissant has been remitted you less for a mark of honor and discretion, than to be employed, to serve, than to be used in order to fulfill the solemn obligation you have contracted. The key which you also see in the draught is a symbol to teach you to keep religiously in your heart the secrets with which you are entrusted, as it is a sacred trust that these illustrious brethren have reposed in you. The zealous charity you ought to have for your brethren is figured to you by the emblem of an inflamed heart, a true symbol of it. As it is the principal object, and most indispensable duty of a Mason to devote himself to practice virtue, what care ought not an elected Sublime Mason to have, never to depart from this principle. He who is in the superior degrees ought always to act effectually to render himself worthy of that distinction. Charity is of all virtues, the principal one which satisfies humanity. Instead of the inflamed heart, which was worn at the time of the written law as a distinctive mark of the sublime elected, we wear a cross the form of which is traced to you. It is the happy epoch of the law of grace we live in. Since upon the cross was spilled the precious blood of the sovereign Redeemer to whom we are all indebted, we are all obliged to wear it, not as a mark which may please our vanity or our affections, but as one of the attributes of our condition and a striking object, capable continually to recall us to that divine author of nature, that sovereign master of our days who has been willing to render himself a victim for the iniquities of our fathers, and to withdraw them from the everlasting torments they had but too much deserved. You see also the two palm trees, very high and lofty, which seem to spread their branches over the tomb of Hiram-Abith. They are the emblem of the everlasting palm, at which we all of us aim, and which are traced for us to be deserving of it. These, my illustrious brother, are the chief objects of our draught, which you ought to keep up to, and study the same, and be always the subject of your reflections. We flatter ourselves, having so fair a road before you, that you will follow it and never enter any other dangerous path to scatter you from the many great duties you are to fulfill. You will find the exertion so much the more easy for it. In short, keeping firm to your obligations and faithful to your promises, we shall find in you a brother zealous and officially charitable, worthy of bearing the respectable name of Sublime Elected Knight, which you have now received. Lecture Sublime Knight Elected. Thrice puissant, are you a Sublime Knight Elected? Inspector, illustrious thrice puissant, my name will inform you. Thrice puissant, what is your name? Inspector, Muth. Thrice puissant, what means that name? Inspector, a true man in all things. Thrice puissant, how were you arrayed when introduced in this chapter? Inspector, I had a sword in my right hand, the blade across my body, and a compass in the left, the point of which rested on my breast. Thrice puissant, why the sword across your body? Inspector, to remind me that my body should be severed in two if I was vile enough to reveal the mysteries of this degree. Thrice puissant, and why the points of the compass on your breast? Inspector, to show that my actions were encompassed as I was found worthy to receive the degree of Sublime Elected Knight. Thrice puissant, how were you reported in the chapter? Inspector, by 7 knocks. Thrice puissant, what signify these 7 knocks? Inspector, the 7 years that were employed in the construction of the temple and its ornaments. Thrice puissant, what is your sacred word in quality of Sublime Knight Elected? Inspector, Adonai, which is God. Thrice puissant, on the password? Inspector, Stoken. Thrice puissant, what is the sign of the Sublime Knights Elected? Inspector, to cross the arms on the breast, the fingers clenched, and thumbs elevated. Thrice puissant, what is the sacred sign? Inspector, the promise I made, always to wear the cross in remembrance of my faults, since they are defaced thereby. Thrice puissant, what is the token of acknowledgement? Inspector, to take the right hand of a brother and with the thumb strike 3 times on the first joint of the middle finger. Thrice puissant, what signifies this token? Inspector, love to God, fidelity to my country, and charity towards my neighbors. Thrice puissant, what did you see on entering the chapter? Inspector, 24 lights. Thrice puissant, what do they signify? Inspector, the 12 masters elected, and the 12 tribes of Israel. Thrice puissant, what are the names of the 12 masters elected? Inspector, Joabot, Stokin, Terry, Morphy, Eliaba, Dorion, Karim, Berthaman, Tito, Zerbel, Benia, and Geba. The first 9 are those who went with the stranger in search of a Kirop. The last make up the number of 12 masters elected. Thrice puissant, what employ did Solomon give them? 4 named them inspectors, that they might be able to give him an account of what was daily done in the construction of the temple. Thrice puissant, in what manner were these inspectors employed to survey the conduct of the workmen? Inspector, Joabot had inspection of the tribe of Judah. Stokin had inspection of the tribe of Benjamin. Terry had inspection of the tribe of Simeon. Morphy had inspection of the tribe of Ephraim. Aliguba had inspection of the tribe of Manasseh. Dawson had inspection of the tribe of Zebulun. Karim had inspection of the tribe of Dan. Berthaman had inspection of the tribe of Asher. Tito had inspection of the tribe of Naphtali. Zerbel had inspection of the tribe of Reuben. Beniak had inspection of the tribe of Issachar. Geba had inspection of the tribe of Gad. These 12 masters rendered daily an account as inspectors to Solomon of the work done by all the respective tribes, and they received the amount of payment to be distributed to all the workmen of every tribe. Thrice puissant, what signifies the tomb at the west door of the temple? Inspector, it is the tomb where the body of the respectable Hiram Abif is deposited. Solomon had it placed at the entrance of the temple to show the Israelites how much he was affected at the loss of that great man, and did it in honor of him whom he regarded and esteemed as himself. Thrice puissant, what signifies the I, H, S, which you see in the draught? Inspector, the I, is the initial of Jiva, the first pronunciation of the ancient master's word. The H, that of Hiram, our respectable master. And the S, that of Stokin, who discovered the body of Hiram Abith. Thrice puissant, give me a description of the urn which is on the top. Inspector, in the urn is the heart of our dear master Hiram Abith embalmed. Thrice puissant, what means the letters N and C on the urn? Inspector, Xinx, a Hebrew word signifying the seat of the soul. Thrice puissant, and what means the key? Inspector, the symbol that we only have the secret and depository of the Mason's secret, and ought to rule our conduct so, to show by example that we are worthy of the trust and charge reposed in us. Thrice puissant, and the balance? Inspector, calls to the remembrance the obligations laid on us, to be just to our brothers and neighbors, since we are those in whom King Solomon has put all his confidence by giving us power to exercise justice and terminate disputes which may arise among Masons from the apprentice to the degree of Sublime Knights elected, which is above them all. Thrice puissant, and the sword? Inspector, to make use of it as we ought to those who do not walk in the paths of virtue, and are so vile as to reveal the secrets they are entrusted with. Thrice puissant, how long did you take to complete the temple? Inspector, 7 years to complete the whole. 6 for its construction and 1 for the ornaments and its dedication. Thrice puissant, how long was the building? Inspector, 20 cubits. Thrice puissant, how many precious things have you in the chapter of Sublime Knights elected? Inspector, 5. Thrice puissant, what do you call them? Inspector, the Ark of Alliance, the golden box, the 2 palm trees, the candlesticks with 7 branches and the veil which is drawn up. Thrice puissant, what signifies the Ark of Alliance? Inspector, it was the figure of Solomon's temple consecrated to God and contained the 2 tables of the law which God gave to Moses on the holy mountain when he contracted an alliance with the people of Israel. Thrice puissant, the candlestick with 7 branches? Inspector, represents the 7 planets and 7 gifts of the Holy Spirit. Thrice puissant, and what the veil of the temple? Inspector, the figure of the Babylonian tapestry which Solomon placed in the temple to separate the holy places from the most holy and sacred place. Thrice puissant, and what the golden box? Inspector, in that box were deposited the hearts of those victims whose sacrifice had been agreeable to God. We also ought to deposit our hearts if our actions are as agreeable to him. Thrice puissant, the palm trees? Inspector, they represent the cherubim one which did cover the holy ark with their wings, as also the joy which Solomon felt to see a superb monument raised to the glory of the Lord. Thrice puissant, and what signifies the triangle with the D? Inspector, the cloud that spread over the ark when Solomon consecrated the temple to show to Solomon it was agreeable to the Lord. The letters signify Adonai. Thrice puissant, what reward did Solomon bestow on the 12 knights elected after the consecration of the temple? Inspector, he styled them his beloved, instituted them Sublime Knights elected, decorated them with a broad ribbon with 3 inflamed hearts and a sword of justice to it, saying to them, you have been the conductors of the works of the temple which I have consecrated to the Lord. Be now the supporters of it against infidels. Thrice puissant, what denote the 3 inflamed hearts? Inspector, that our hearts ought to be charitable to our brothers and neighbors. Thrice puissant, explain to me the 5 letters you have on your cross. Inspector, the C is the initial of Sivi, Tanil K, that of Kai, to rise E, that of Muth S, that of Solomon and A in the center, that of Adonai. Thrice puissant, what signify the 4 kneeling you made before you came to the throne? Inspector, the 4 gates of the temple and the respect we should have to enter a place consecrated to God. Thrice puissant, what signifies the word Sivi, that the sublime elected utter when illustrious, puissant goes to the throne? Inspector, kneeling before the great architect of the universe. Thrice puissant, and the word Kai? Inspector, rise and receive the reward your zeal and labor has deserved. Thrice puissant, what denote the 3 knocks given with the sword on the candidate's head before it is delivered to him? Inspector, strength, charity and brotherly love we ought to have for our brothers. Thrice puissant, Why have the Sublime Knights elected naked swords in their hands in the chapter? Inspector, to be always ready to run to the assistance of our brethren in their defense and that of religion against infidels. Thrice puissant, why is not your chapter opened until midnight? Inspector, because some of the Sublime Knights employ the day by fighting the infidels and the others in deeds of hospitality, and at midnight they must meet to account for what they have done. Thrice puissant, why is the chapter closed at break of day? Inspector, to execute during the day what is ordered to be done by the chapter. Closing ceremonies. Most illustrious Master, Brother Stokin, what's the hour? Stokin, victory is ours and Hiram is revenged. Most illustrious Master, since victory is ours, and Hiram is revenged, we ought to be satisfied and rest ourselves. Most illustrious Master, Nox 5. Stokin, Nox 5. Adoniram, Nox 5. All, Nox 5. Most illustrious Master, I declare this chapter of Master-elect closed.